Welcome to the Reality of Herbal Therapy Podcast, episode 74. What is the life on the shelf? So the other day, Lynn had a call from a friend of hers who was really concerned with everything going on in the world. And she's on antidepressant medications, and she can only get a 28-day supply at a time. And then she has to go back to the doctor and get it renewed and get some more. So she can't get any extra. And even if she could get extra, the life on those medications is really short. It's like maybe a year at most. So Lynn was asking me about the herbs. And we get that call quite often. How long will the herbs last on the shelf? There's a lot of variables, but just about everything we make will last at least 10 years on the shelf. And a lot of people are like, wow, that's a long time. But some of them will actually last longer. The ones that don't last as long have high oil content, and so that oil can go rancid over time. But part of the reason that the herbs can last so long is they're dehydrated. So there's not any water left in the herb. And so any of the vitamins that are delicate enough to be lost will have already been lost. So then once we encapsulate it, it's completely covered and sealed inside of the capsule. And if you keep it in the bottle, keep it in a cool, dry place, Dr. James basically would say they could last indefinitely. An example of how well plant life can exist in a cool, dry place. Dr. James's grandfather was a well-known farmer up in the Four Corners area of New Mexico. He lived up near Farmington, and a lot of people knew him, and he was very skilled at planting things and being able to get seeds and stuff like that. So some archaeologists were digging in a cave, and they found some really old beans, like 2,000 or 3,000 year old beans. And they came to Dr. James's grandfather and asked him if he could plant them and get some more seeds out of them. And he's like, well, I can certainly try. So he had a special garden where he would grow the seeds that the archaeologists and the researchers had found. So when you see Anasazi beans today, they're common in New Mexico. If you're not in New Mexico, you can find them in other places, but it's it's a white bean with black dots on it. And that is one of the beans that some archaeologists found. They had been basically in cold storage in a cave for several thousand years, and Dr. James's grandfather was able to sprout them, get them to grow, and get enough seeds out of them to actually make them to where they can be grown today, and they're a viable bean that is used today. So with herbs, basically you want to do all you can to preserve that freshness and that quality. Everything we do, we want to make sure it is as fresh as possible. Most of the herbs that you get from us are no more than 2 or 3 months out of the ground, and some of them are even less. We want it to be as close to when it was in the ground to get to you, because they're much more effective at the less time there is. But once you get past 6 to 8 months, they don't really lose much more, and so they're still good for a long time. But because of the quality of herb that we always look for, the herbs are much better, and they'll last quite a bit longer. So some tips for keeping your herbs to where they'll be good and effective. If they're in the sunshine, that will destroy a lot of the vitamins and the effectiveness of them. So you want to make sure you do not keep your herbs in the sunshine. If you have a dark cabinet or a dark pantry, a dark room, something like that. That is like one of the optimal places to keep them. The brown bottles, the amber bottles, because it doesn't let in the sunlight. It blocks that sunlight. But you want to make sure that it's not someplace that's really, really warm either. So sunlight will damage the herb, the vitamins and the nutrients in it, but so will heat. Heat can damage the nutrients. And that's why all of the herbs that we have, that we use, are never heated above 100 degrees. And when we get them, or from any of the manufacturing process that we do not want them to get so warm that it will break down any of those nutrients. So that's a little bit on shelf life and how long you can keep the herbs. Basically, they're good for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. We've had people find, packages, and they'll call up and they'll say, "Hey, I found some herbs in my closet," and they're in this, like, one of the older forms of packaging we had, and they're like, "Are they still good? Can I take them?" And if you haven't had bugs in them, that's another thing. You want to make sure bugs can't get in them. But if they haven't had bugs or mice or other things get into them, they are just fine to take, and they are just as effective as if you had bought them 6 months ago. So I hope that helps. If you have any questions, let us know, and we will talk to you next time. It is not the intent of professional herbal instruction or any persons associated therewith to diagnose or prescribe. The intent is only to offer herbal information for your consideration. In the event you use this information without your doctor's approval, you are prescribing for yourself, which is your God-given right. But professional herbal instruction or any persons associated herewith assume no responsibility. The claims and statements made on this podcast have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. These products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.